Welcome to our little schoolhouse, also known in its former academic glory as Union Joint Graded School Number 9. For almost 4 years now, we've been turning this old brick building into our home. And in that time, we've tackled a lot. A new roof, restoring the original floors, pouring concrete in the creepy basement, building new walls, coaxing the original brick back to life, making custom mosaics by hand, and salvaging every single original door we could find. Oh, and we also did things like build the kitchen ourselves. But come with me, I want to show you one of my favorite spots in the whole school. It's right out here on the roof deck. And before I show you the big reveal of this space, I want to take you back in time a little bit and show you where the idea for this space really started. 10 years ago, Sean and I were living in New York City, hopping through all the classic apartment stages of tiny kitchens, noisy radiators, and one apartment where our bedroom window was just a piece of plexiglass that looked into our roommate's room. But one of those apartments, one of the rare gems, had a terrace right off the kitchen, which in New York terms is basically the real estate equivalent of winning the lottery, especially on our budget. The little terrace turned out to be everything when the pandemic hit. And at that time, Sean was a surgical resident working right in the thick of it at one of the hospitals hit the hardest and the earliest. It was incredibly intense. There were lines around the block for groceries, tents in Central Park, refrigerated morgue trucks parked near my favorite running routes. It was surreal. But that terrace became our escape. We'd replace traveling with getting cookbooks from around the world, and we'd go to different groceries around the city where we'd make dinner, and then walk right out of the kitchen door and sit in the fresh air, pretending just for a bit that the world wasn't on fire. And later, when things opened up a tiny bit, it was a spot where our lonely little pandemic butts saw our friends again. And we swore back then, if we ever get to design our own home, we're going to have a patio or a deck that connects straight to the kitchen. Back then, though, we just thought we were going to find some quirky old fixer-upper in the Midwest and get to work. But flash forward to 2021. We buy a 110-year-old schoolhouse, like you do. And while we were still living on the East Coast, tackling the big stuff like the roofing or repointing the bricks or figuring out how to turn a classroom into a kitchen, we were already dreaming about that deck. And we knew we wanted our kitchen to be on the southwest classroom for proper Indiana sunset catching, and we didn't want to put the garage in the basement due to fumes, so garage with a roof deck it was. My friend Danny, who went to architecture school, he helped us sketch out the early ideas, and he even hid little references to our dog Pin Pup all over the drafts, like an architectural Where's Waldo. Then we passed those sketches along to Cooler Design here in Indianapolis to get the real architectural plans drawn up. Last summer, the garage finally started taking shape. I touched on this in my last video, but truly, watching something physical rise up out of years of sketches and spreadsheets was surreal. Then, in the fall, I got to visit the Pollywood factory right here in Indiana. If you've ever heard of Pollywood, it's outdoor furniture made from recycled plastic, like actual milk jugs. The tour was wild. On one end, they're loading up beat-up milk jugs that get recycled, chopped up, and melted down into super durable high-end furniture. And we picked out some pieces for the roof deck, assembled them, and even managed to host our first hangout with friends who came to visit from New York before the winter rolled in. And it was a little chilly, and we didn't have railings yet, so we went out while the kids were asleep, but it was so special. When winter hit, the deck took a seasonal nap, and we kept things cozy inside, cleared a bit of snow here and there, and spent more time scheming up what the space could become. Which brings us to today. So I'm up here on the roof deck of our schoolhouse. Today we're taking on another major upgrade, installing the FlexiSpot aluminum louvered pergola kit PG5. And it's spring in Indiana, so in the morning I'm wearing my heated vest, and in a few hours, I'm getting a sunburn. The pergola is going to go over here on this section of the deck. And this deck is south facing, so it's pretty sun blasted all the time. And we wanted to do things to make this space usable as much as possible, whether doing workouts or hanging out with the kids or playing in a little kiddie pool, and just make it possible to spend as much time as possible up here enjoying the gorgeous Indiana sunsets. All right, so the pergola just got delivered. It was a super simple drop off, but now we've got to crack open all these boxes and haul them all upstairs. The FlexiSpot instructions say that it takes 2 to 4 hours with 2 people. We have the bigger pergola, so I'm guessing it's more on the 4-hour end of the spectrum. Luckily, the toddlers are with their gram today, so we actually have a fighting chance to get this thing done. We'll see. At this point in the install, we were about an hour and a half into it, and the hardest part was mostly getting it up the steps. And in these moments, I was very glad that the FlexiSpot pergola is made out of aluminum instead of steel, which is great for long-term rust resistance while being very sturdy. And after we got the main skeleton of the pergola built, it was time to complete the water management system, because this thing actually has super elegant water channels that keep you dry when you're sitting underneath it, and the water flows into these built-in gutters that flow down the sides of the pergola into the pillars and out the bottom. It just required a little bit of caulk on the build side. Guarantee this is going to be the worst part of the whole project. It is sturdy, but I still can't do a pull-up. For the final step, we slid the louvered panels into the S-shaped slots. These are what provide the shade from the sun and some protection from the rain. It was definitely the most time-consuming part of the install, but since the pieces came with this design, it uses a lot fewer screws, which was really nice. And that's how we installed the FlexiSpot aluminum pergola. And honestly, I didn't expect just how much it would transform the space. What used to feel like one big, undefined stretch of deck now has a structure and a sense of flow. The pergola breaks it up in the best way. It creates a cozy, intentional room to kind of hang out in. A bit like sitting under a big shade tree where there's still light and a breeze, and it's very comfortable. The adjustable louvers are super easy to work with, and the sunshades are helpful both for the sideways evening sun and the wind. They've kept this area so much more usable. And I was really excited about adding a pergola, but I didn't realize how much it would make this space more versatile for dinners, for playing with the kids, or just escaping outside for a moment. And since we've wrapped up this install, we've added some plants, strung up some lights, which took an afternoon, and gave the whole deck a fresh coat of stain to protect it long term. And thinking back to what this garage area looked like a year ago, it's kind of wild how far it's come. For other updates around the schoolhouse, it's still just been a lot of work in the yard. I briefly talked about it in my last video, but we've been busy planting over 50 trees. And then earlier this spring, I also put in 12 cedar birdhouses to start, back in March, using some of the leftover conduit from the we're gonna check all the birdhouses to see if there are any baby birds in them, okay? I see a nest, but I don't see any baby birds. There's a nest in there. Don't get too close. You see sticks?
Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, I don't think we're gonna check that one. I think there's a nest in there. And I think she's really mad. So we're not gonna bother her. You see her?
I'm pretty.
She's all fluffed up. She says, get away from my babies.
The other birdies are going to Kroger.
To Kroger?
Yeah,
Okay.
on the tree.
Oh. For all the landscaping we've been doing, it's going to be a multi-year project. And I'm trying to use almost all native plants and trees for the landscaping. My first reason to do this is that native plants provide food and shelter for local pollinators and critters, and without them, many species struggle to survive. But also, native plants are built for the climate that you live in, so it's easier to be a lazy gardener because these plants evolved for your specific local region, which means less watering, less fertilizing, and less babying. And one thing about planting natives is that they are a lot more difficult to source. Most of what you find at the big box stores are not native, so it just requires being more resourceful and just a lot more research. I got these red twig dogwood shrubs from fastgrowingtrees.com because when I called all the local nurseries in the area, they only had Asian varieties, and I wanted the North American native. We started what will become our little hedge with these little red twig dogwoods by planting them along this retaining wall by the garage. Okay, so the funny, not so funny thing about this retaining wall is that after about 6 inches of topsoil up here, it is stone all the way down, which makes it really good for the retaining wall and really bad for planting shrubs right behind it. So I had to dig out huge holes of stone and ended up putting it in the driveway to support these shrubs and be able to have them live here for hopefully decades to come. And I chose these dogwoods because in the spring and summer, they have lush green leaves and clusters of white flowers. In the fall, their leaves often turn shades of red or purple. But then in the winter, that's when the real show happens. Their bright red stems pop against bare landscapes like spiky little pieces of garden art. So I'll be sure to report back this winter. And also, apparently birds love the berries. In the larger yard landscaping, I'm making a couple exceptions for non-natives that are not invasive, and these are mostly because I want to have a foraging yard too for cocktails. So right now we have some roses, some annuals, and these lilacs. I planted them because I want to be able to make lilac drinks in the springtime. Okay, so for the garden, here are some updates. We have almost everything planted now. Definitely need to weed all of the little silver maples that keep popping up every day in here, but still need to do this center part with the garden sculpture. Basically, I just need to elevate it a little bit and take off all the gunk. But yeah, and then back here, not done mulching, but have some annuals and have some flowers back here. But yeah, a little messy right now, but it's starting to come together. And then last but not least for this video, something for the kids. Last video I showed how we built their big playground from Cedarworks, but we also built a little gnome house next to the garden.
This house.
Oh yeah.
This house.
This is a nice little spot for the gnomes.
Oh yeah, a tree house.
Oh, right here? Make a tree house for the gnomes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay, let's go look at the other trees. We can use some glass that we just found in the yard and put it in our gnome house. What do you think about that, Arlo?
That glass can be the table with the gnomes.
Okay.
Look, a door bark.
Okay, yeah, that's a good door bark. Oh man, more metal. Oh, gross. Do you want to use these flower pot pieces for the gnome house? Okay, let's pick up some pieces. We'll put them on here. And one day while we were out here doing yard work on the deck, we were lamenting how much more work there was to do in this whole yard. And then we heard a big crash and someone had swerved into our mailbox and sped off. So add that to the list of work to do. So I got the beat up mailbox out of the field and then cut it in half and glued some shingles on and some windows, and now it's our gnome house. This right here.
It says gnome chicken.
Gnome chicken? You can.
Box in my room.
What about the ones that are in the garage? Let's go get them. Are you getting the moss, Margot? Okay, go put it in the bucket.
And rocks. Yes, it's what those for.
Rennie?
And the other one.
Up next for the schoolhouse, the work continues. The next few weeks, we are site prepping some sections of the yard to plant wildflowers, and inside, we've been hanging some of the schoolhouse items that people have donated to the schoolhouse. As always, thank you so much for all the tips and suggestions on this journey. I really love some of the things people suggested on my last video about creative ideas for the kids. Until next time, thanks as always for coming along as we work on turning this old school into our house.